Hi, everyone. It's me, Tim. Today, I want to talk about adding a feature to a game back in the day compared to today. I almost called this Why Game Development Costs More, but I think that will attract a lot of angry attention. So, what I want to talk about is development costs. And I want to talk about it in the context of why adding a particular feature is harder to do today than it was 20, 30 years ago. I see a lot of people talking about game development and how it takes longer and it costs more, but they often get the underlying reasons wrong. Um, and sometimes I think they deliberately get it wrong because they're trying to promote an agenda or get clicks or views. And sometimes they just feel like insulting developers. So it's like, we're talking about how much it costs, and that'll get people riled up, and then they can be mad at developers. So I just want to be clear, this video is not about economics. It's not about inflation. It's not about marketing and distribution costs. It's about purely development costs. And it's also for people who want to understand why those development costs have gone up. I'm not going to defend it. I'm not going to justify it, but I'm going to explain it. So going forward, you will have an understanding of why making a game in the 2020s costs more than developing a game in the 80s and 90s. First, let me explain it at a high level, and then I promise I will give an example and walk through it in detail so everyone can chew on it. Here's the high level explanation of why development costs have gone up. Back in my day, one person did everything. You had an idea, you did everything to put it in the game. Now, it's a pipeline. There. That is the entire explanation at a high level. It does explain everything because pipelines make things more expensive and longer. But now I'll explain why, and I'll give you an example. And the example I picked was something that I watched happen in Fallout in the 90s and The Outer Worlds in the late 2010s. So these were separated by more than 20 years. And that thing is, someone had an idea where they wanted to add a quest. And the quest was some NPC on one map wanted to tell you about another NPC on another map who had a really cool gun. And they would want to tell you, I think he'll sell it to you. And they tell you where the other NPC is. So it's a matter of putting both of those NPCs in along with the weapon. Back in the mid-90s, in Fallout, one person could do all of that. And I will walk you through exactly what it did. First, I'd add the first NPC to an existing map. Maybe, put somebody on a street somewhere just standing there. Trivial to do. We had NPCs you could pick by appearance. So it could be one of those loser guys, or it could be one of the guys standing around in spiky shoulder armor, or it could be somebody in the hub who kind of wore tattered looking clothing but wasn't a loser. You could just pick them and plop them down. Making a dialogue was trivial. There was a preset format to it. You could type it, you could get it put up very quickly. Very little to do with this person. They just, hey, is it the first time they met you? Hey, I've got something to tell you. I know this guy with a gun on over in this other town. Blah blah, and that's it. When they see you again, they might say nothing, or they might just go, "Hey, did you ever get that gun?" And if you did, you could show it to them. And they go, "Oh, it's a nice gun, isn't it?" You could literally have that character and that dialogue knocked out in an hour or two. Then you go to the second NPC. So you load up that other map. Maybe you pick some alley or something, and the guy has told you, oh, he hangs out in an alley. You plop him down. You give him very similar, whip up a dialogue, very easy to put him down to. And the dialogue where he talks about, yeah, I got this gun. You could check whatever you want to check. Does he like you? Are you offering money? Does he ask for more? You can put whatever you want in the dialogue. He might sell you the gun. Boom. Then you take the gun. You grab a gun from already set different models we have. And we didn't have that many different ones because they weren't that detailed. Maybe you just grab an existing one and change its name and description. And then you change the stats a little, saying, oh, it fires really fast. That's why he liked this gun. Or maybe the clip chamber, it holds, 20% more bullets. That's why he's like, I really like this gun. I modified it myself. Trivial to do, just numbers in a editor, bam. You take that new item, you plop it in a chest, you put it next to him, and you lock it. Then you create a key that you ID to that chest and you throw it in the guy's inventory. Guess what? You're done. Right then in Fallout, that provided all these different ways. You can hear about the guy, or you may stumble onto him. You may the first NPC may have told you, or you may have just found the guy. You can talk to him. He will check whatever he wants to do to sell it to you, and pick a price based on his reaction to you, whatever. You can buy it from him. We already had like barter built in, so you can call things to do that. Boom, you have the gun. Or maybe you just kill him and take the key and unlock it. Or maybe you say, I don't want it. You come back and you sneak behind him and you pickpocket the key off him. Those are all systemic things that you can do without anyone having to check. Nothing. Guess what? You're done. I saw people do things like that in a few hours. Boom. Suddenly you have a new thing to do. You get a cool new weapon and you're done. You can make them as the characters as funny or sarcastic or whatever, what you want. It's done. It's in. You're finished. Now let's talk about doing that exact same thing in a modern game. And I said how it's a pipeline of people needed to do all that. Let's walk through that. So you want to make a new NPC. You got to make their face, right? Because we're first person and you will walk up and you will see their face. And there are so many options on making faces because you don't want everyone to have the same face. And you wanted a lot of options anyway, so that when the player made their character, they could have a lot of options for their face. None of this happened in Fallout because it was an isometric game. You never even saw people's faces except for the few clay models we did. But everybody's got a face, so you got to do the face. Well, once you give the face and you decide a body and you decide all the different armor pieces that go on it, because there's a lot more options, because people want variety and they're seeing it at first person close up. You pick all that up and you put the person on the map. Oh, wait, did you set up lighting for him? Because lighting is really important now. We didn't even have lighting like this in Fallout, but the lighting is really important. And when you talk to them, the lighting and the camera setup are super important because are you seeing his face or her face? And are you seeing the right angle? And did you set the camera up? Because if there was something blocking them, or if there's something preventing a distance, like they're standing on the other side of a counter, or maybe they're behind bars or whatever, you want to make sure that camera doesn't get stuck. So you have to check all that. You have to make sure the lighting is right. If they're outside and there's day and night lighting, you got to make sure they look okay for all of those. Wow. So just deciding where they're standing has suddenly become a huge set of decisions and variables you have to keep in mind. Oh, but don't forget, this modern games use voiceover on all this. So he's going to be VO'd. And let me just tell you, every narrative designer learns this. Writing dialogue to be read versus dialogue that you will hear as a voiceover are two separate skills and completely different ways of writing a character. We ran into this in Fallout where some of the characters we wrote really well, suddenly when we discovered they were going to get a clay head and they had to be spoken, had to be rewritten. So talk to a narrative designer. That's just a thing. Oh, but wait. Modern games are localized into a lot more languages, meaning there's going to be pipelines after you write that dialogue where they get marked as needing translation. So hope you never go back because this stuff gets locked early and then you're stuck. You can't change it unless you're willing to spend a lot of money. Oh, remember this is about development costs and time to go back and change those dialogues. Where it would have been trivial in Fallout to go, oh, the guy actually tells you he's in an alley, but we decided to move him into a back room. Oh, I'll go back to the first NPC and replace alley with back room. Oh, you won't be doing that in the modern game because we already sent that off for localization and VO and ugh. Basically, there's just so many more logistical issues to think of. And I haven't even talked about the additional memory and CPU processing that is needed to get all the stuff working right. So there's optimization concerns and profiling, and people may come back to you and go, we have too many NPCs in this one area, or hey, we're going to have to make his face different because we're loading in too many different face parts or whatever. Who knows? So that's just because it's modern. I haven't even talked to you about the pipeline stuff. So let's talk to what happens when a feature becomes something one person puts in to having a lot of people in a pipeline. I broke it down into 4 areas that just become a lot more complicated. And by complicated, I mean time. And by time, I mean money. So let's talk about communication overhead. Once it's not one person doing all of it, all those people that are in that pipeline have to talk to each other, or at least have some form of communication. They need to know, what are the goals of this character? What's the intent? Is this somebody who can be killed? Are they supposed to be nice? Should they change price based on reaction? Are they part of a faction? Is there anything that would make this quest not be available anymore? They need to know these things for their part of the pipeline. This means at the minimum some documentation or some meetings or just literally talking to each other, which I've told you it's really important. None of that was needed back then when it was one person. One person might go, idea, implementation, before lunch, done. Can happen. The communication overhead when a lot of people are involved is way higher. Oh, but now that there's people, you have to deal with scheduling and something I call scheduling offset. Because when person A in the pipeline finishes and hands it off to person B may not be ready to start that. They may have a ton of other things on their plate. They can't start right away. So that next step, you don't want that to disappear. You don't want anyone to forget what's happening. It's not, when person A finishes, it's not his job to remind B about it every week until they do it. So all this has to be tracked. So a producer has to be involved. In fact, a lot of producers have to be involved. Where you could have gotten away with one producer in the 90s, you're going to need 4, 5, or 6 producers now, because there's lots of these half-finished tasks that are waiting in the pipeline for the next person to be available to do it. And maybe you need a particular person with a specialization, so not anybody will do it. I probably should do a video on fungibility. But that's why we have schedules, and that's why you have issues with these tasks getting offset in time. All that has to be tracked. This hasn't even begun to talk about why some or all of the stages in that pipeline take so much longer than they used to. I mentioned it briefly, like an item back in Fallout. You have a ground item and an inventory item, and then what the weapon looks like, what the item looks like when you're wielding it. But those tend to be, a bunch of those tend to be made, and then you can reuse them for lots of items. Probably not for your 3D first-person game. It needs a new model for the ground, and maybe another one for the person holding it, and maybe a new 2D image to be used in your inventory. Maybe it's 3D, maybe it's 2D. Those will all be new because you want it to look different, because it's very visible. It's very high resolution. Lighting didn't exist in the early games. It exists in this one, and you're going to have to make sure it looks correct when the person is just standing there, and so you can see the person, so you can talk to the person, all that. Lower resolution basically meant you could get a lot of reuse of models and textures and riggings and things like that. Can't do that in modern games. People notice because it's first person, it's high resolution, the distance to the camera is closer. And that applies to almost every stage in the pipeline. Let's talk about bug fixing. Newer games, all that complexity, guess what? More bugs, more time, more money. You just can't avoid it. Worse, once there's a pipeline involved and you have to fix, and a bug is detected, well, who made that bug? When it was one person who did the whole thing, you could go, Bob, your quest is broken. Here you go. But now there's a pipeline of people. Who broke it? I don't know. Often you have to get a programmer just to find out where it's broken, which takes down a programmer who may have had nothing to do. There was no programming involved in making this simple quest about going to get this weapon. But you have to find a programmer to debug it and find out where the problem is, because that will determine who needs to fix it. Oh, but wait, it's a pipeline of people. Remember, pipeline means more people, longer development time. Maybe that person isn't available right now. Why? They got moved on to another project because what they do was considered done for this project, and they're only brought back in for bug fixing, and there's only a limited amount of time, and they only have one day a week where they're allowed to bug fix on this game. Or maybe they're on vacation, or maybe they left the company, because remember, these take longer to make, so this is more likely to happen. Also, there's more people, so the probability of any one not being available is higher, and you'll hit it when there's a pipeline and there's more people. So there. I know I got very excited. This is why the same feature was faster and easier to do back then as compared to now. Short answer, pipelines. Longer answer, communication overhead, scheduling issues, longer stages at each stage in the pipeline, and then bug fixing. All those take longer and are more complicated in modern games. Therefore, they take longer, therefore they cost more. I can't think of any easier way to put this. I hope this makes sense. Like I said, I'm not defending it. I'm just saying this is an explanation of why it's happening. Sure, people could make games like they made in the 90s. Nothing's stopping you from doing that. Oh, wait, I don't think people buy as many. The retro market just isn't as big. Anyway, again, not trying to justify it. That's your explanation of why it takes longer to put in a feature, and that's why games cost more.